So now that we have our sliding table attached and moving, it's time to work on the fixed top. Now we want the fixed top to be at the exact same height as the sliding tabletop, which is why we waited to cut any strips for this. The fixed top is going to be held up by strips of MDF, and you're going to want to cut these after your sliding top is installed, so you can tweak the dimensions a little bit to make sure things line up perfectly. The other thing we're going to do before we start locking things together too much is inlay some T-track. We're going to have 2 pieces of T-track on the fixed top where we'll attach the router fence. We'll also be inlaying 2 more strips of T-track in the sliding top so we can attach auxiliary fences and other support materials. Finally, we're also going to route our opening for our router lift. So we need to route an opening size for this router lift in our fixed top, but then we also need to add another hole in our sub base. And when we're building our torsion box, we want to make sure we leave plenty of room for our router lift to move up and down. So let's get started with that T-track. The first step in inlaying T-track in our sliding and fixed tabletops is routing some grooves for those. In our fixed tabletop, we're inlaying T-track to attach the fence. So we're going to use stopped grooves for that T-track because we don't want it to go all the way across the edge of the table. So our grooves are going to be 4 inches in from the side and a full 7 inches long. So I am just going to give myself a reference line here. There. And then we'll be using this quick jig I whipped up here. So the jig itself is just a square fence with a sliding fence, a movable fence. So you can sandwich the material you want to inlay inside of there, and then using a router with a top-guided bearing bit, you can cut your groove and it'll fit perfectly. Check this out. So I'm going to line up the edge of my groove here. I'm going to give myself a mark for the stopped portion. And because the router bit is circular, we're going to have to do a little bit of chiseling at the end here to square up the groove. So this mark on the top is just to give me a visual reference for where my router bit should be stopping. I'll probably have to do a little bit of checking and tweaking there, but I don't want to go beyond that mark. So all I need to do now is clamp the jig in place and take a couple of passes with the router. So I've set my router to the full depth of the slot, but I'm actually going to route this in 2 passes. So I've got my plunge base fixed there, and then I can come up and back this off. So we'll try to go about halfway to begin. It's right about there. And then we'll come back and make another cut to clean it up. And then we just plunge to full depth and do one more pass. And then you can see the T-track just falls right in there. I left it a little bit shallow of where I need it to be at the top here, so we'll chisel that out and square it up. Now you really shouldn't chisel laminate too often, so I'm using a little bit of our beater chisel here, and I'm just going to try to carefully score the laminate so I don't crack it when I'm putting pressure on it. And I'm just rocking back and forth a little bit. That one looks good. You can hear some cracking. So far, so good. I'm coming back through the top here to square it up. I'm really just scoring it here. So far, so good. Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah, that's going to square up nicely. Once you get through the laminate, you're just chiseling through MDF, and that's pretty easy. But again, not great for the chisel. There we go. Test fit. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to cut full grooves on our sliding table. So in our sliding tabletop, we also want to inlay some T-track. We're going to have one about 3.5 inches in from the front edge and another one as close to the back edge as possible. Now, I don't have a jig built for this one, but it's going to follow the same principles. We'll clamp a fence in place here, pop our T-track in, clamp another fence in, and then do our routing. I'm just going to remove this front fence to make sure my miter slot fits in my groove. Oh, it's pretty good over there. It's a little tight back here. So, oh, there's actually a bunch of stuff in there, that's why. Still a little bit tight up here, so I'm gonna back the fence off just a hair and do one more quick pass. To insert the T-slot in the back edge of the sliding table, I'm actually only going to use one fence because I don't have a lot of clamping surface on the other edge. So I'm going to have one end of the fence at 1.5 inches, and that's just to verify we're missing all of our bearing and our screws there. I'll clamp the edge in place, do one pass, and then I'll cheat it over a little bit and do another pass. Yeah, that's pretty good. So next we want to cut our T-tracks to length, and the easiest way to do that is just to position them in the piece, flush up one end, and then mark your cut on the other end. Now, the T-track is made out of aluminum, which is softer than the carbide teeth on the wood cutting miter saw blade. I wouldn't recommend cutting aluminum purely with your miter saw all the time, but a few cuts isn't going to hurt anything. So I want to make sure I line up my cut here and leave it, it's better to leave it just a little bit proud, and then we can nibble back on it. Do one more there. Check the fit. Perfect. And those edges feel pretty good. I'll throw some screws in the T-track to keep it in place, and then we just got a couple more cuts to make for the fixed table. So I went ahead and made a jig for our router plate here. Now you can see that there's a little bit of play in the jig, but not too much. That's because we want our router lift to be able to come in and out of the table relatively easily. Now I also went ahead and added some layout lines on our top, so the base is centered in the top and about 1 inch from our leading edge. I'm going to go ahead and trace the inside of the jig, and then I'm going to come in with a jig saw to clean up most of the waste, and then we'll come back with a router to clean it up. So now I'm going to go ahead and add a few clearance holes and then come back with a jigsaw to saw out the waste. I'm going to do a clearance hole in each corner. So after using my jigsaw to take the waste out of the middle, I've added the jig back on, clamped it in place, and I'm going to be using this top bearing guided bit to clean up the edges and make it nice and flush. So I just finished routing the hole in my subassembly top. I did that in 2 passes. It's just like we did in our fixed top. So next we're going to be building the torsion box for the top, and we're also going to be adding some hardwood blocks for leveling and supporting our router lift. So the first thing we're going to do is attach our undermount support strips. Now I made these out of solid wood because we want to have something good for the router lift screws to purchase into. Now I left myself about 1.5 inches of lip on the outside. That means I've got 1 inch left over on the inside. So I'm going to come and measure in about 1 inch from the inside lip, and this is just so I can lay out where I'm attaching my pieces. Do the same thing over here while I'm at it. Now my hardwood support pieces will just be attached thusly with a little bit of glue and some screws. I also want to make sure I have them positioned correctly, so I have space for a full piece of MDF in the front and a full piece in the back. So I'll go ahead and glue and screw those into my top. I'll come back and do the other one, and then get to building the rest of the torsion box. So I've just finished putting pocket holes in all of my torsion box pieces, and I've roughly laid them out here. So I'm going to pin together with a little bit of glue all of the corners and then position it exactly, drive some pocket screws to hold the torsion box to our fixed top. Now you might be asking yourself, what's the deal with this piece of 1/2 inch plywood? Well, I didn't measure precisely, which is really important. And so I ran out of room to have a piece of 3/4 inch MDF on the back side here. So we'll just use a scrap piece of our 1/2 inch plywood, and no one will be the wiser, except for you guys, of course. So I've got my box pretty much assembled here. And then this will just screw to the back once it's all together. Next thing I'm going to do is screw it down using some pocket hole screws. Start with this one. There we go. Now with MDF, you want to be sure you don't torque it down too much. You could end up stripping out your hole a little bit. All right, so there's our top, and it's just going to be attached to our router table, like so. Next thing we need to do is actually attach it, and we'll just be shooting some screws up from the bottom. So I went ahead and sunk a few screws into the bottom of my table here just to keep this in place. And then we're going to flip it over and drive in the rest of them. But before we do that, I wanted to show you the stops I put in here. So it's just held in by a single screw, it's just a scrap of MDF, and that just makes sure that when you're sliding your table, it doesn't go off the rails. So I'm going to flip this over, drive in a few more screws, and then we'll start building our fence. So our fence starts out as just 2 pieces of MDF. I've cut them the same width as my table, and they'll just go together thusly. But before we attach them, we want to route in a channel for some T-track, and then we're going to remove some wood in the fence and the support piece in the back for the router bit. Let's get started. So we have our 2 fence pieces cut out here. Now before I go ahead and laminate the front, I'm actually going to permanently attach the front fence to the back support piece. So to do that, I'm just going to pre-drill some screw holes, throw some glue on there, and drive it home. There, now we have our fence permanently attached and glued in place. So I'm going to let the glue set up a little bit and we'll put the laminate on. So now that I have the laminate glued to the front of the fence, I'm going to come back and trim it with my laminate trimming bit. Now you'll notice that there's the bearing on the top, and it's also set shallow enough that it'll be able to route into those grooves. So not only will I be doing the outside, but I'll be cutting in with the trimmer too. Now you can tell by the ragged edges this is leaving that the bit has been used quite a bit here. So we're just going to come back with file and sandpaper, clean these up. So the next part of our fence is the integrated dust collection. It's basically just an L channel that I'll attach to the support and the fence with pocket screws. Pop a little cap on this end, dust collection fitting on this end, and it'll be sucking dust right from the router bit. So the last thing you need to do with your fence is line up where your adjustment hardware is going to go. I drilled these holes slightly oversized so it's got a little bit of back and forth play and the fence can angle. And then your knobs just lock it down when you've got it in place. So with our top and our fence put together, it's time to build the cabinet.